do, we are not at my office. We usually do this class at my office, and my wife comes to the office and brings a whole bunch of food and cooks some there. But because of the COVID-19 and doing it with Blackboard, we're at my house. And we're in my kitchen, and we're cooking for us. This is lunch today. You might hear the dogs running around here a little bit, but anyway, we're on the phone, so it's a little hard for me to see the screen. And if you raise your hand, hopefully I'll get some feedback from one of the admin folks and answer any questions that come up. I'm going to be my wife. This is my wife, Stephna. She's a personal trainer and has been consulting with people on their diets and cooking paleo for nine years.
Well, that's how long we've been eating it, but I've been consulting with people probably for the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about why eating Paleolithic is a good idea and what that means from a health perspective. And then she's going to be showing how to do that and some substitutions that are that we make when we eat paleo and why you make those substitutions and that sort of thing. Basically, paleo is kind of eating the foods you like already, but just kind of cooking them in a little bit different way. 500 years ago, if I had told you, this is maybe in the time of Galileo, if I said, well, the earth revolves around the sun and the earth is round, I might have been a heretic and you would have burned me at the stake or something like that, but we know those things are true. Some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today are just as weird and revolutionary as people may have found those back then. Things like, the 4 food groups and the food pyramid is not really your friend in many ways. And things like grains, even whole grains, really aren't that great for you. And things like the government may not be the best source of information when it comes to diet and what to eat and that sort of thing. They're not really looking out for your best interest. There's lots of other sources of information that you may want to call on. And the internet's great, but then bad in some ways too. But when it comes to this subject, I think it is really pretty super. It's got a ton of information, and it makes eating paleo relatively easy and relatively healthy. There's lots of ways that you can look things up on the internet. If you like certain foods, you can just type paleo before that. So if you like spaghetti, type paleo spaghetti recipe or paleo pizza recipe or whatever else. Desserts even can be paleo, and you can overdo sugar when it comes to that. But we'll talk about that here down the road a little bit. Basically, what is paleo? Paleo is how men evolved, human beings evolved, from the time we started using very primitive tools way back. They say maybe 2.5 million years ago, up until about 10,000 years ago when we started farming and ranching. That is considered the Paleolithic era. And during that time, which was millions of years, we evolved into eating in a certain way. And like I said, there was no ranching and there's no farming, so we didn't have a lot of grains in our diet, and we didn't milk the cows like they do on the ranch. We shot the cow with a bow and arrow, and we ate the cow. Yeah, we ate the meat of the cow instead of turning the milk into cheese and eating that and that sort of thing. So if you kind of think, oh, well, how did these people eat back then? You can kind of get an idea of what eating paleo is all about. And it's really, really simple if you really boil it down. And here's what eating paleo is, essentially. here's your plate, the plate on your table. Approximately this much is meat. This much is veggies. Mostly non-starchy, like white potatoes are kind of off the plate. They're something that we usually don't recommend, although there's some starchy veggies that are great. Sweet potatoes are really, really good. Beets are very good for you, have lots of nutritional value. Squash is kind of starchy, and we're actually going to be having some spaghetti squash here in a little bit. And then there's a small plate out here that has nuts and fruit on it. There's several things that basically are not on your plate. So when they're not on the plate, you can't eat them. There's sugar, particularly refined sugar. Fruit sugar is okay, depending on any health conditions that you have and that sort of thing. But grains are not on the plate. That's something we really avoid. And then the other one is dairy. So the one that people freak out the most about, in my experience, is the grains. Basically, anything that's grain-based is something that you want to avoid. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'll go into in a little bit, but this includes bread, pasta, cereal, that sort of thing. If you think about it,
Right on there, no processed food.
yeah, try to avoid anything that's processed as well. In the grocery store, you want to stay in the areas that get electricity, essentially, because they're refrigerated. So if it comes out of a box, you want to kind of avoid that. If it has to be refrigerated for it to have a shelf life in the grocery store, then that's something that you want to eat. If it doesn't have to be refrigerated to have a shelf life, like cereal in a box, the bread tends to have a significant shelf life, especially these days, the way they process it. Those sorts of things you want to stay away from. So eat stuff that's either fresh or frozen, essentially, or refrigerated. Essentially, this is kind of the proportions. With this, you don't get a lot of calories, even though this makes up the bulk of your volume of food, you don't get a lot of calories from this. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend against eating vegetarian. You can eat healthy being a vegetarian, but it's kind of difficult. You've got to rely on things like beans. Now, I didn't mention beans here, and beans are kind of one of those things that I kind of leave up to the individual. Beans can have a lot of protein in them. They can also have a lot of starch in them. They don't tend to have the problems that grains have, but some people say, well, beans aren't paleo, so they leave them off. In general, there are some problems that beans cause with your gut, that if you have certain gut issues, you want to avoid those. But beans, for a lot of people's situation, can be eaten. And one of the, it's kind of optional. You can ruin beans pretty quickly by adding things to them, like refried beans. Refried beans, you have a lot of oil, and you can make good refried beans by adding the correct oils in, but a lot of times they'll use the cheap oils, which they call vegetable oil. However, vegetable oils aren't made from vegetables, they're made from grains. Corn oil, soybean oil, this sort of thing. Go ahead.
So while he's telling you the why part, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing in the background, just to let you know. So what I'm making for a substitution is, and every so often I will show you how to do it. I've already got the things already cooked, so when it's time, they'll already be ready, but I'll show you how to get there. But today we are substituting spaghetti squash for spaghetti, okay? Then I'm making a an Alfredo sauce out of cauliflower and coconut.
You should have a recipe for that.
So these recipes are how to do it. The spaghetti squash. So I know he's hungry. My dogs like to eat the vegetables when I cut them, except mushrooms usually. Okay. Shh. Here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to saute some vegetables to go with the sauce and shrimp to go on top of the spaghetti squash. So that's what I'm doing in the background. And I will try to suffice my dogs with the treats because they love cauliflower. So that's their treats. So that's what I'm doing. I will interject in the process of doing all this of how to make paleo tasty, I guess, because some people think it's really bland and it's blah, but it's like gourmet food.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, and I have a small kitchen, so anybody can cook this way because this is the extent of my kitchen, little bitty. There you go. All right, there you go.
So there's 3 big problems with grains, and this really comes down to why we eat this way. The 3 problems with eating grains are anytime you digest grains, they digest down to sugar, essentially. And sugar is bad for you. The other thing is the gluten. And whether or not you're sensitive to gluten, some people are, some people aren't, it's a protein that really isn't all that great for you. There's a really good book called Grain Brain, and it's by Perlmutter. He's a medical doctor, but he's also a nutritionist, very smart guy. It's a great read, has tons of references, but he really believes gluten is quite an evil protein. And it can cause, it's been linked to gut problems, obviously. People think about it like celiac disease, that sort of thing. But it's also been linked to heart disease. It's been linked to Alzheimer's. It's been linked to ADD, ADHD in children. It's really, this book is quite good. It really is. Grain Brain by Perlmutter. And then the last thing, and the thing I think probably is most important, is the omega-6 fatty acids. And omega-6 fatty acids essentially cause inflammation in the body. Now, they're essential. We need them in the body, but if they're not balanced properly with omega-3s, then it's a situation where it's going to cause excess inflammation in the body. And inflammation basically kills most Americans these days in one form or another. So if you can avoid inflammation in your life by avoiding eating grain-based foods, then you're going to be in a situation where you live longer. But not only that, I think it's important to live a long life, but more important than that is to live a healthy life. And let me go into a little bit of detail on why omega-6s are so important. So, omega-6s come from grains, like we said. They're grain-based. Omega-3s come from fish, or grass, or walnuts. Those are great sources of them. Flax seeds are great sources of these. These should be balanced approximately 1-to-1. There should be about a 1-to-1 ratio in the body. Some studies say 4-to-1. Most of them say 1-to-1, that sort of thing. However, the average American is about 1 omega-3 to about 20 omega-6s. So we're way out of balance when it comes to this. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. we eat cereal in the morning and maybe eggs, and the chickens have been fed grains their entire life. And then we go to lunch and we eat, let's say, a chicken sandwich. And the bun is made of grains. It's some kind of bread. And then the chicken on the bun has been fed grains its entire life. And then we go home at night and we eat pasta or something along those lines, and maybe have a salad with that. And the pasta is made with grains, and the salad dressing is usually made with grain oils. You know, American farmers are extremely good at their job. We have tons of grains in our society, so it's very inexpensive. It's very, very cheap to have grains. So they use them in lots and lots of foods. Very, very inexpensive. So it's used abundantly. But this results in this 1 to 20 ratio that the average American has. Why this is so important is this stuff goes through a couple of chemical steps and turns into a chemical called prostaglandin E2. This stuff is naturally occurring in the body, but if you have it in excess, you'll get pain and inflammation. Now, and many researchers believe that this chemical is the number one cause of pain in America today. If you have inflammation of your arteries, you'll end up with heart disease. If you have inflammation of your pancreas, you'll end up with diabetes. If you have inflammation of your arteries in your brain, you may have a stroke. If you have inflammation of your brain, you're going to end up with Alzheimer's or some other disease that's just like that. So inflammation is really the common denominator that causes these conditions that kill most Americans these days. So if you can cut inflammation in your body, you're going to be in a situation where you avoid these killers. And when I say inflammation, a lot of people think of like, oh, you know, my skin is red and inflamed. And it's not really like that. It's a low-level inflammation that occurs over a long, long period of time. If you hit your finger with a hammer, it gets swollen and red and inflamed. And prostaglandins are formed by the body to help that heal. And that's normal. But the inflammation goes away and it doesn't come back. This is this chronic, low-level inflammation that you find throughout the body that causes tons and tons of problems overall. So you want to avoid this at all costs. Here's the other thing. What do most people do if they have pain in the body? They go to some kind of painkiller. There's an enzyme that is blocked by aspirin, Advil, ibuprofen, any kind of what they call a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. That enzyme works right here, and it's called a COX enzyme. If the COX enzyme is blocked, then you don't have these, but this stuff goes and it turns into something else, and it'll cause even a greater degree of heart disease over here. So you don't really get away from this by other than changing your ratio. That is by far the best way to do it. And the biggest factor in changing this ratio is avoiding the thing that causes it to begin with, and that's the omega-6s that are in the grains and the grain oils.
Can I interject?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, he's got your scientific equations going on in your head. I'm going to show you real fast how to cut this spaghetti squash and how easy it is to cook. So, really fast, I'm cutting the end off. Some of these are really big and really hard, so I use my bigger knife. This one's a smaller one. You're going to cut it, you can cut it many different ways. Most of the time, I cut it lengthwise, like so. There's seeds in there. Take a spoon. You're going to scrape it out. I usually use my grapefruit spoon, but I can't find it. Then I always use parchment paper. I've just, ever since I've started cooking paleo, parchment paper or these little protectors are very essential so you don't have to scrub your pan because I roast lots of vegetables. So it's like so. I like to do it upright. You can drizzle olive oil or a spray olive oil. This is avocado spray. I'm going to do like so. Some pepper. Voila. 400 in the oven for about, I checked it at 25 minutes, but then it needed more, so it does take like 35 minutes to 40. But you want to be able to stick your knife through it when it's done. So I'm going to do the other one, and I'll put it in the oven, and then it will be done. Voila, because I already cooked them. Okay, back to the grains. Dr. Masters, hit it.
Hey. My wife doesn't call me Dr. Masters at home.
Yep.
Here's the problem. Food manufacturers, this is the old chart I had. Food manufacturers use our body's own programming against us. During the Paleolithic era, food was not nearly as in abundance as it is currently. I mean, we don't, in America, usually have problems with people starving to death. Back in the Paleolithic era, that was a thing. That could happen. So we are programmed to crave foods that are high in calories. So what foods are high in calories? There's two of them that are the highest: fat and sugar. So our bodies crave fat and sugar. And things like French fries, oh my gosh, you cannot get a higher caloric value than that. High in calories because the potatoes are basically starch, and then high in calories because the oil that they're cooked in is also quite calorie dense. So we crave these things, and you get to going on them and you can't stop eating them. They're really, really good. Not good for you, but they taste good. They satisfy this body's ancient craving for getting calories so we can survive. And then the other is sugar. Sugar used to only be available at certain times of the year on certain trees. The tree would grow a fruit and you'd eat that and you were like, oh my gosh, the fruit is full of sugar, and you eat more and more of that. And you just really, we were made to survive by doing that. And that's really how like animals survive these days. A lot of them are in a situation where before they go into hibernation, they eat lots of caloric dense foods. But give me a second. The things that are high in calories these days are grain-based foods because they've got lots of calories in them, not only from the fat in the grain, which is the omega-6s for the most part, but also from the starch in the grain. And you know, you eat a piece of bread or a pastry even, it's the fat and the sugar in it both. It's really yummy, you know, and many people just really crave these things. And it's this ancient programming that we have, and food companies know this, so they make the foods hit that exact right level for us from a sweet and sometimes a salty and sometimes a fat standpoint. So we get all of this stuff in our foods, but they use this against us. Like one of the most addictive foods is Oreos. Oreos are full of fat and full of sugar, so they hit both of those bases for us. So watch out when you're grocery shopping, because if you're in a situation where you succumb to the manufacturer's manipulation of the food, you will pay the price down the road.
Whenever.
Yeah, so don't allow them to take over your programming and be in a situation where you don't benefit from the information that you're going to learn at this class. You go ahead.
Okay, I'm highlight what he just kind of said, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm doing with the cauliflower. So back in the day, when you had to eat whatever was available, you had it like weeks and weeks because that's the season that it grew in. I think today's society, there's so much variety out there that your body expects something different. So, you know, you get bored of eating, let's say we had sweet potatoes the other day and I still have some left because it was in season and it was less expensive, so I bought a lot, then I'm gonna have it the rest of the week. So with paleo, it's good to buy with what's in season and what's on sale and learn how to distribute it throughout your week so it's not that expensive. But to know, it's like if you grow a garden, then, you know, if I produce a lot of tomatoes, then I'll have to either eat them or can them and figure it out how to keep them and not let them go to waste. But that being said, it's okay to have something in a repetition that you've eaten in the earlier in the week and have it later in the week. But going back to the recipe of the cauliflower Alfredo sauce. So I chopped up some cauliflower, then I flipped it in a pan. The recipe says water, to cook it in water. I think it adds more flavor if you use a bone broth of some sort. This is chicken, so I'm cooking it in the bone broth. Once I finish cooking it, then I'm going to put it in my food processor, which I've got some started over here. He's breathing. I think he's smelling the garlic, but it smells very good. So I roasted garlic, and then I also roasted the cauliflower for this first batch, just because roasting your vegetables gives them so much more flavor, and it seals in the nutrients, because that's what I want to eat vegetables for, is the nutrients. My body has been eating this way for 9-10 years, and so I crave vegetables all the time. So I can't get enough. But, and he knows, because I eat salad almost 3 times a day. So I've got it in here. I'm going to whirligig it in my food processor with the chicken stock. I did put a little bit of coconut milk in it, garlic, and then I'm also going to add a couple other spices. And the cauliflower, the cooked cauliflower, is going to blend up, and it makes a sauce.
So why the coconut milk?
Yes, creaminess. So instead of dairy for milk, I used a can of coconut milk because it has the least amount of ingredients. Instead of going to the refrigerated department where they're in cartons, if you look at their ingredients, they add lots of stuff. This has the least amount in a can. So bear with me, I'm going to make some noise.
Yeah,
okay?
She's going to be a little noisy here for just a minute.
Just
so.
a second. It's a little lumpy, but I don't want to ruin it. I'm going to let you see. There is Alfredo sauce in there, so I'll probably add a little bit of salt and some other herbs, maybe some oregano or some basil. And then I will add it to the vegetables over the cooked spaghetti squash. So back to you, Dr. Masters.
So essentially what we're making today is Alfredo sauce with shrimp over spaghetti, but in a paleo version. That is, if you have that from an Italian standpoint, where you're using the wheat for your pasta, and then you use dairy, regular dairy for the Alfredo sauce, and maybe add in some other oils and that sort of thing. I mean, we're talking an artery clogging combination here for sure.
I am Italian too.
Yes, she's Italian already. So, and this conversion has been really good for both of us from a health standpoint. Back to my presentation. Over the last 150 years, grains and grain-based foods have come to provide most Americans with 75 to up to 90% of their caloric intake. The highest amount of calories in America today is provided by high fructose corn syrup, which obviously is made from corns. It's the fructose out of the corn. It's refined, and it is horrible for you. Fructose is really bad for you. But because of how inexpensive corn has become, we've gotten to the point where manufacturers use that in tons and tons and tons of stuff. So I mentioned 3 big problems with grains. I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on those. The first one being sugar. The molecule, when you look at sugar under a microscope, it has a lot of kind of sharp edges to it. And this stuff going into the arteries scars the inside of the arteries. One professor that I follow, who is kind of a guru on this stuff, he says it's like giving a kid 2 sabers and he runs down the inside of your arteries, scarring them up as you go. And when the artery is scarred, it is far more likely to have deposits of fat in there. And fat is normal in our blood, but if you have inflammation and scarring of your arteries, you're going to have heart disease, you may have stroke, you may have dementia due to not enough blood getting to your brain and this sort of thing. So this sugar is really to be avoided at all costs. The other thing with sugar is it increases the insulin in your blood. Insulin is another molecule that is very bad for you. It will cause arteries to clog up very quickly. They did a study on dogs, and they took dogs and they put an IV into them, and they dripped very slowly pure insulin into their blood. And within about 3 weeks, that artery had pretty much closed up because of how much inflammation and clogging of the artery that there was. It's kind of scary. The other thing about having high insulin in your blood is you cannot lose weight. It's almost impossible to lose weight. The fat cells basically bring in sugar to store, and they will not allow it to leave when there's insulin in the blood, because your body wants to get that sugar out of your blood at all costs. So those are a couple of problems with sugar. Gluten, I kind of talked about gluten earlier. It irritates the gut. It is a protein that's also somewhat inflammatory, can cause problems with the brain. Those are probably the 2 biggest areas with it that gluten causes problems with. And most people are familiar with folks being gluten sensitive, which is usually a gut issue. But oftentimes that comes from a long, long line of problems with the gut that are associated with the candida and that sort of thing. I kind of brought a chart that goes into that. This is another issue, and I hope you all can see that. This is supposed to be the intestinal tract, and this is the good side and the bad side. The good side is coated with these good bacteria. Over here, where you've got a more high sugar, high carbohydrate diet, the good bacteria, the probiotics, have been basically pushed out, killed off by the high sugar diet, and candida or yeast, it grows in its place. When this happens, you end up with what's called leaky gut syndrome. Leaky gut syndrome has been shown to be allergy related. It's related to ADD. It just causes tons of problems. So this is a whole other issue that goes along with eating paleo. So another issue with that is immunity as well, which, talking about immunity, right now with the COVID-19 virus, 90%, some researchers say 70, some researchers say 90% of your immunity comes from having good gut health. If you do not have good gut health, your immune system is depleted. That is pretty much guaranteed. And when you're in this kind of a situation, you're leaking nutrients into your blood on a regular basis that your immune system has to deal with, and your immune system just gets kind of worn out when that happens. And it becomes hypersensitive as well. So there's many autoimmune problems that result from this. Leaky gut syndrome is just really, really bad for you and can be helped a ton by eating paleo. Now, I am not recommending necessarily a gluten-free diet. you can eat very badly eating gluten-free. I mean, really, if you think about it, you can have soda pop is gluten-free. Candy bars many times are gluten-free. There's just lots of things that are gluten-free that are still not good for you. They're still full of sugar. Rice tends to be gluten-free, so they base a lot of their foods that are gluten-free on rice, like gluten-free cereals and that sort of thing. But rice still has omega-6s that create inflammation. So I don't necessarily recommend a gluten-free diet. And then I already kind of talked about how bad the omega-6s are for you, and getting into some detail on that. But did you have something else?
Just to throw in, as he's telling you the why part, I'm going to tell you just a couple brief, easy ways to start. First, take out the processed foods of your diet, which includes, well, there's a lot. I tend to bake my own things. I don't eat a lot of baked goods, but when I have my grandkids over, or I have a family get-together, such as my mother, I bake a paleo bread, and she really liked the last one that I made, and she commented on that. So there are ways to do that. So I don't buy packaged things. She was going to bring her own buns for hamburgers, so I made paleo bread instead, and she ate that with her venison burger is what we have. But so you're taking the processed stuff out first. Then, like he said, when you're shopping, you want to go around the exterior. The things that I go in an aisle would, of course, be cleaning supplies, but nuts, which I eat nuts and fruit for breakfast. I don't eat a lot of it throughout the rest of the day because I'll eat the vegetables and my meats. But when you buy nuts, that's another factor. Read your label and your ingredients.
And peanuts are not a nut.
They are legumes.
Yeah, and they're not good for you at all. They're full of omega-6s.
And so soybeans.
Soybeans as well, yes.
But as you're looking and shopping for nuts, it might say natural or, roasted nuts. Okay. So your nuts are sometimes, and I have thrown a whole container of nuts away because it has canola oil in it. And most nuts that are, processed. So canola oil is made with vegetables that
it's a grain
it's
oil.
A grain, such as corn or soybean or whatever. But so I don't eat that.
3 oils that we recommend, and it's not just us, this is just recommended for paleo. There's avocado oil, coconut oil, or olive oil. And these are for cooking or making salad dressings, that sort of thing. All 3 of these are an omega-9. There's 3, 6s, and 9s, which I haven't really discussed. And 9s are not abundant in our diet in America, but they're okay for us. They're fine. So eating those are very good for you. There's flaxseed oil that you can use. It's an omega-3. And another one that's really good for you is walnuts. Walnut and walnut oils. Walnut oils are quite expensive, but walnuts are full of omega-3s. It's a great source for omega-3 fatty acids.
So we're going to give the top 5 nuts, but when you're shopping for nuts, you want to try to get them dry roasted. Sometimes they'll add salt to it a little bit, but dry roasted or raw, such as walnuts.
Is probably the number one that we recommend.
Also Brazil nuts. Yeah. They are really good for you too. They have selenium. Pecans are okay. Pistachios are relatively good. They're better for you than almonds, and almonds are kind of on the lower end.
When she says lower end, she means it has a higher ratio of omega-6s to 3s.
Right. And a lot of the paleo recipes, such as when he said, and that's what I do. I'm a Pinterest penny or whatever you call it. But I put the word paleo in front of any recipe, and then they'll list out all the different recipes that people have come up with. So anything. But so let's say Alfredo sauce. There's a couple different ones. The other one is cashew is a base, and I have made several things with cashew, but they actually have a percentage of omega-6s in them too, so they're not as good for you. So I'm trying not to use them or very much, but they do make some cheese, like cheesecake and that type of thing. But it also makes Alfredo sauce. So I chose the cauliflower, which is excellent for rice also. But the cashews aren't as healthy for you.
You were talking about getting started, like now.
Macadamia nuts are on the list too. They're good.
Oh yes,
they're expensive, but they're good.
Very good and good for you. And just, Walmart sees what happens in the market and they respond to it. And like you can get a lot
of products at Walmart instead of having to go to the natural grocers or Whole Foods, Aikens, grocery stores to get these. Although there are some things that you do have to go, but they are now carrying the flours, such as almond flour, coconut flour, cassava flour, plantain flour, even at Walmart. Even cauliflower flour is at Walmart now.
And they have cauliflower rice at Walmart.
Yes, in the produce department.
Yeah. So the way she makes cauliflower rice is takes raw, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And
either chop it up if you don't want to use your food processor, but the food processor is very easy. Just whirl it in there, and it turns it into little rice granules. So that's another substitution.
Tastes really good.
Like the pasta for rice dishes, I use cauliflower, and I just crave it sometimes. It just tastes so much better than rice.
It has a better, once you get used to it, it's a better flavor, I think, than rice. And the nutritional value is way better than rice. Right. Way, way, way better.
And it doesn't give you that bloated feeling that you get when you eat, your corn and your rice. You just feel so bloated, so you don't have that. Yes, your gut is more in tune.
So I talked about how bad the 6s are for you. Let me talk a little bit about how good the 3s are for you. They have researched omega-3s to death. They really have. They've been doing research on omega-3s for decades now, decades. They have found that when you have a higher ratio of omega-3s in the body, you're less likely to get heart disease. You're less likely to get cancer. It has anti-cancer properties. It is good for your brain. You're less likely to get Alzheimer's, less likely to have a stroke. They have found that it helps arthritis. I cannot tell you how many patients that I have who I've gotten to take an omega-3 fatty acid as a supplement, because it is very difficult to get enough of this in your diet. It's practically impossible. If you want to be healthy, you've almost got to substitute. What's the guy? You got to, the guy that used to sell commercial or sell furniture. Yeah. You've got to substitute or supplement with omega-3 fatty acids that you almost can't get enough in your diet otherwise. But over the last 50 years, researchers have found that not only is our omega-3s situation where they're helpful, but they're curative in some cases. They found that they're curative with prostate cancer and prostate problems in some cases, and I'm not going to say every case, that they're very, very good and in some cases curative for brain issues. They've studied it with schizophrenia. They've studied it with depression. They've studied it with anxiety disorders, and it helps all of those. Omega-3s are just really, really good for you. So how much should you take omega-3 fatty acids? And you can get these at Walmart. I usually recommend, this is one of those things I usually recommend going to like natural grocers or a health food store, because I think their quality is just a little bit better. But if you're just normal and everything is healthy and you're just healthy as can be, 4,000 milligrams a day is a really good amount. And read on the label, if you're in a situation where there are 1,000 milligram pills, then you take 4 of them. The folks who have problems with, oh, I'm overweight, I've got heart disease, I've got arthritis, I've got some kind of condition that I'm trying to help with that, then usually I recommend between 5 and 7,000 milligrams a day. If you have chronic arthritis, inflammation, that sort of thing, 7,000 milligrams is what I usually recommend. Now, that's 7 pills. At that point, I usually recommend going over to some kind of a liquid. And they've got lots of liquids that are pretty good tasting. We carry one at the office that's lemon flavored. If you have any kind of neurological condition, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, they've studied schizophrenia, as I mentioned previously. Thank you. They recommend 10,000 milligrams a day. Just to tell you a little story, I had a patient she's.
Surprised you haven't used me as a sample. I love that.
Yeah, Steph, before we started eating this way, we got our blood tested to see what our ratio is, and there's a test that you can do.
First, we went to the nutrition class.
Yeah.
And then I went ding, ding, ding. He said, we're going to do this. So that's the day that we did it.
But her ratio was
1 to 29.
Yeah, 29 to 1.
That's way
high. It wasn't
high.
20 to 1, it was 29 to 1.
I thought that we were eating a really good diet.
We were at Standard American
But
Diet.
I was not taking
my
supplement.
But we were eating grains. We ate pasta. We ate bread.
We ate whole
wheat.
And
grain.
Brown rice.
Yeah. So, but we weren't eating paleo, and she was 29 to 1. That's like you're almost guaranteed to have some kind of health problem with that in the future. But back to this patient that we tested her subsequently, and now she's
1 to 4.
Yeah, 1 to 4, 1 to 3.
But I was taking 6 omegas.
Yeah, we've got a couple of them in our fridge. She likes these. These are pills. I take the liquid myself, and like I said, this one you can get at Natural Grocers. It's Nordic brand. It's a really good brand. It's very, very healthy. This is one that we carry at our office. It's called NutriWest. Any patients that are pregnant, I always recommend this one. It's molecular filtered 3 times, so it's very pure. But back to this little girl who's a patient of mine. She came in to me with back pain, and she was 17. Her mother brought her in, and she got treatment, and we put her through rehabilitation, and she was exercising, and we found problems on her x-rays that were obviously needed these kind of services. But she was like, I'm not any better. She just never really got any better. And it wasn't until, and being 17, I never thought, her ratio is going to be off that badly. But she was very, very skewed in regards to her omega-3 to 6 ratio, and that was what was causing her pain. And she didn't want to take this stuff because she was like, oh, it's going to taste bad, and I don't want to take it, and that sort of thing.
That's how kids are.
She goes and she finds this peach mango flavor, and I didn't know that existed, but she found a peach mango, and she said she could drink that stuff all day long. But the thing about her is, when I saw her subsequently, she's like, oh yeah, I feel great. She doesn't have any pain anymore. Her inflammation is decreased. She's just really in much better shape. And I can't tell you how many patients that I've had who are in the same boat. I had another one just very recently. I've nagged her for years about getting on an omega-3 supplement, and she's like, yeah. Well, she comes to me, and this quarantine issue that she was under, when I hadn't seen her in about 2 months, and I was like, whoa, that quarantine has not been good to her. I didn't say that to her, but she looked older. She was more hunched. She kind of walked differently. We got her on omega-3s, and she went through a bottle in about 5 days, and comes back. I saw her on Saturday when I was at the office, and she says, you're right. I can tell a big difference. And her pain's gone. It's diminishing, I should say, after about 5 days. But she can tell a big difference. Now I got to keep nagging her and have her change her diet. But anyway, if you have any kind of chronic inflammation in your body, really start taking it. It can make a huge difference in your life. If you take enough, and especially if you're cut on your grains, so you're increasing your 3s and decreasing your 6s. I have a number of patients who will take like 1 pill a day. Well, that's not enough where you're going to be able to tell a difference. If you're taking 7,000 milligrams a day and you're cutting back on your grains, you're going to be in a situation where you can tell a big difference quickly. So talk about what you're doing. This came out of the oven, I guess.
So this is the ones I just put in is not done, but this is what I cooked earlier this morning. So it comes out of the skin, and so you can just keep scraping until you get it all out, or you can be like me and eat it later when it's cold. But it looks like spaghetti, and it has the texture of it. The trick to this is you don't want to overcook it because then it turns into mush. So stabbing it and scraping it just a little bit to see how well it's separating from the side.
And how much is a spaghetti squash at Walmart? Just sorry, I caught you off guard there.
It just depends.
If they're in season or not.
Right. Spaghetti squash. It looks like 3 of them were $8. Okay. So depending. Sometimes they're like 2.5 a piece. So it's not, I don't think it's that expensive. I mean, you're gonna, a box of pasta is probably less.
Oh, yeah.
But the nutritional value is so much higher in vegetables than in grains.
They grow in Arkansas, really.
Oh, good to know.
They do?
I have not tried to grow them. But they would be something I would, because they are very good. Okay.
Okay. So you can get your omega-3, omega-6 ratio tested at your doctor's office. That is, it's a blood test that is very easy to do, and they can take it with the vein, or they can be in a situation where you prick your finger. There's certain lab will do it off just a finger prick as well, and send that in. And what happens when you start eating this way? Just, what kind of results are you likely to expect? I think it all depends on the person. But I brought some blood tests on 2 different patients of ours that were before and after, and I was going to kind of show this real quick. This guy, he ran his own company and was a driver. He was a real hard-pushing kind of guy, and his wife was a dedicated patient. She'd been coming in for a long time, and she was very worried. He was not feeling well. He was in a situation where he was starting to gain some weight. He was also a smoker, but anyway, this...
Excuse me, Dr. Masters?
Yes.
Can you actually hold that up at the top a little bit more, because it's a glare? Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay, that's good right there?
Can you tilt it a little bit back? The top a little bit back? Oh, a little bit too much. Come back down. Okay, that's better. Okay.
Okay, sorry. How about that?
No, can't see it.
Is that better?
That's better. That's better. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
This was on 3/19 of 2019, and he ate pretty much whatever he wanted. He ate soda pops. He ate a bad diet. Like I said, his wife had been nagging him for some time because I was telling her about it, and he was like, "I'm busy with work. I'm not going to do any of that good diet stuff." When we tested him, his cholesterol was 250. That's scary. But his triglycerides, and I've got the blood test to show all this. I just put it in a graphic form here. His triglycerides were the most terrifying I've probably ever seen. 784. This is the one I worry the most about when it comes to heart disease. His glucose, and he hadn't had blood tests in several years, so he had no clue that he was in this bad a shape. His glucose was 362. This combination is guaranteed heart disease. There's just no doubt about it. His hemoglobin A1C, which this is the #1 indicator of whether or not you have diabetes. Basically, this is hemoglobin, which is a normal protein in your blood, and how much sugar is attached to it. So it's an indication of how much sugar is in your blood over a period of time. It was 12.5%, which is very high, well into the diabetic range. Anyway, his wife, he wouldn't have been this dedicated to it, but his wife was like, you're not gonna die off on me. So she was very militant about his diet for about 4 months. And on 7/16 of 2019, which is almost exactly 4 months later, his cholesterol went from 250 down to 177. His triglycerides were the most amazing thing, and they are very sensitive to sugar in your blood. If you have high sugar, you're going to have high triglycerides. They went from 784 down to 84. So this astronomical change. His glucose went from 362 down to 86, which is actually a little bit low. That's below the normal range there. But we think he still had some hypoglycemia problems from his previous issues. And then his hemoglobin A1C, which, like I said, is an indicator of diabetes, went from 12.5 down to 5.3, which this is well within the normal range. So basically, he cured his diabetes by eating paleo over a 4-month period of time. Now, if there was any drug out there that could get these kind of results, it would be on every other commercial on television, and every news show would be doing exposés on it. But because it does require work, it really does, but it is dramatic results. And I have his before and afters to back this up. I didn't just write these on here. I've got his before and after blood tests. Another patient.
Side effects than
drugs.
And
Far less side effects than drugs. Thank you very much. And not only that, positive side effects. The side effects of this are, I feel better. I have increased health. He had
more energy.
He had better energy. He had better stamina. His wind, he could walk up and down stairs at his house without any problem. I mean, there are so many things that are beneficial when you have this occur. I had another patient, and he wasn't in nearly as bad a shape, but he was just as motivated because he was filing for insurance. He was getting life insurance. And he said, if I go in with these blood tests, I'm going to get flagged. I'm going to get in trouble and have to pay a higher premium for the rest of his life. So this is 3/7 of 2019. His cholesterol.
Ask if they can see it again.
Can you see that one? Good.
Okay.
His cholesterol was 260, which is high. It went down to 198. He was really happy with that. And this is over about 2.5 months. His triglycerides, which were again, a really big indicator of heart disease, went from 168 down to 53. And his glucose went from 102, which is really not that bad out of the normal range. It's a little higher than we like to see, but went down to 47, which is lower than we like to see. He was militant about his diet, and he actually called me in after he got his test done, and he said that one of the first things he did was have a glass of wine. He was really very motivated to not have his blood test look bad when it came to his test that he did for his life insurance. But anyway, those are some of the kind of results that you can see when you start eating this way. It can make dramatic changes in your health, especially if you're very dedicated to it. And she talked earlier about food's kind of tasting the same. There's a lot that you can do with spices and herbs and that sort of thing to change how they taste. You can give it more of an Asian flavor, or you can give it more of an Italian flavor, and this sort of thing.
And while he's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and plate these up. I'm going to put the sauce on it. I'm going to garnish it with some sliced tomatoes and avocados and some olives, and then put some hot pepper shakings on it. So that adds a little extra flavor and texture. You can actually put this on a plate and have a salad with it too, which salad dressings are a big thing when you're trying to eat paleo, because salad, there's many things that you shouldn't put on it, but vegetables are great to have, but sometimes you want that little bit of dressing, and a paleo salad dressing would be balsamic vinegar, either olive oil or avocado oil makes a great one, and then all the spices, and then if you want just a teeny tiny bit of a honey in it, and even mustard, it makes a great honey mustard, and then you add your garlic and your onion, and then whatever herb, like I like cilantro or dill, and then even cumin adds a different flavor too, or even squeezing a lemon on your salad instead, but not adding the canola oil or the corn oil in your salad dressings is a plus. And then I use a jar and I shake it all up and on my salad. But I'm gonna plate this. So one thing I would recommend, if you are gonna try the Alfredo sauce, if you have a food processor and a blender, I'd probably put it in the blender to make it thinner and not as textury. Are you reading her notes?
Yeah.
So
and you added some things to the sauce.
Right, I just sauteed some vegetables to add to it too, and some shrimp. So I'm going to put that on here and garnish it, and then I'll show you the outcome. Anyway, so it's a little thicker than I would probably do, but we're going to eat it anyway, because it's very tasty. I had tasted it.
You know, I have talked to my mother about eating paleo, and she says to me, she says, you know, I just don't like vegetables that much. And when I think back to my childhood, I can understand why. You know, she used to boil Brussels sprouts. And if you've ever had boiled Brussels sprouts,
not good, not
horrible,
good.
Horrible. But if you take those same Brussels sprouts and you roast them in the oven with some olive oil on top and some salt and pepper and maybe some Italian seasonings, they turn into one of the most delicious things that you can imagine. They really, really are. And what's that restaurant up in Rogers that has that as an appetizer?
The one.
It's a Asian restaurant. It's on Walnut.
Yes.
Sorry, can't remember the name of it right now.
Well, several restaurants will have that as a side dish now, and they will roast them or add a little bit of balsamic reduction to it.
And I'm talking delicious. If you haven't had it, you don't know. Because I hated Brussels sprouts because my mother used to boil them. It was horrible. No wonder she didn't like her own vegetables. But I had another patient who she was probably in her middle 80s and just riddled with arthritis and horrible pain, just in a lot of pain. And she told me, well, I've been a vegetarian since, because I was trying to get her to eat paleo, which has meat in it. She said, I've been a vegetarian since I was about 40 years old. And, but she says to me later in the conversation, she says, but you know, I don't like vegetables all that much. So what
is she eating?
She basically eats bread. She's a bread-based vegetarian. You know, you can be a vegetarian and eat that way, but it's not at all healthy for you. It's just really not. While we're talking about the immune system, I wanted to discuss some other things that you can do to boost your immune system, especially during this COVID-19 epidemic that we're having. And I think one of the #1 things that you can do to boost your immune system is take vitamin D. Vitamin D, I recommend that everybody take 5,000 IU per day. 5,000 international units. And this pill is the tiniest little pill you can imagine. It's really, really tiny. There's not much to it, but this has been shown to boost your immune system greatly. It really, really can. Another one that I recommend that everybody take is probiotics. Probiotics are good for your gut. We talked about gut health earlier, and if you take probiotics, it really helps improve your immune system. They've done study after study on this as well. You want to look at two things when you're at the store, and you want to look at, well, what kind of probiotics should I have? You want your count of organisms, live organisms, in the billions, not the millions. You want to say in the billions. And then you want a high number of strains. So the more strains, the better, and the more count of live organisms, the better. You want to take something for your adrenal gland. The adrenal gland is not something that I really went into today too much, but it is very important for your immune system too. And because we talked about the adrenal gland at a stress class that we had for Ollie here a month or two ago. Anyway, the adrenal gland is very, very good for your immune system. If it's weak, your immune system's going to be weak. You can get a good adrenal supplement at any good health food store. We have a great one at our office. It's really superior. And then the other thing that I recommend that I already went into quite a bit of detail on is omega-3s. Taking an omega-3 supplement. Those are probably the 4 things that I recommend everybody take every day. Don't miss. So this is the food that we're going to be eating here in a couple minutes. And she's garnished it with olives and that sort of thing. But yeah, there's shrimp in here. We have the spaghetti squash that's underneath there. The sauce on top, and that has a number of sauteed vegetables in it. What's in there? Spinach, mushrooms, and what else?
It's actually baby kale, spinach, or baby kale, onions, and mushrooms.
Okay. Kale is a green that is extremely good for you. It is full of nutrients and vitamins. It's better than spinach for you. It's just got lots and lots of stuff in it that's really, really good for you.
I'm going to taste this just to make sure.
One of the things, yes, feel free. One of the things that we get a lot of questions about is the cooking portion of it. So if anybody has any questions for me or my wife, Stephna, we're happy to answer those. I don't know if anybody has any questions or.
Dr. Masters, this is Josh. I've got a question.
Okay.
And maybe this is kind of an oxymoron since we're talking about healthy things and healthy foods, but I like to enjoy a glass of wine with my meals. So is there an adult beverage or a wine that we classify within a paleo diet?
That is a great question, and I get that one all the time. Drinking wine, some people consider it paleo, some don't. If you're going to drink wine, I usually recommend staying away from anything that they add sulfites to, which is usually an organic wine. Sometimes that can affect the taste a little bit.
Pinot Noir is your better wine of the ones to choose? Yes.
Pinot Noir has a high amount of resveratrol in it. Yes. Highest amount of any wine. So usually, if you can, an organic Pinot Noir is really, really good for you. So that's one. My daughter.
An alcohol.
Actually, sorry.
I'll tell when I do drink, which is not very often because of all the sugar in it, it does affect me in not so nice ways. I cannot drink wine anymore because it adds to confusion and makes me feel awful, like I'm sick.
It's not worth it for her.
So I don't drink it at all. Even though it tastes great, I don't. I refrain. But I can tolerate a grape vodka is my with only lime juice and soda water. So it has no added sugar to it. It's my favorite.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. So it's.
Another thing, just so you were asking, I happen to have something in the fridge. I'll show you. And I don't want to.
Our daughter is a liquor.
Our daughter is a liquor.
Yes. Leave out the mixes. The mixes have the sugar
They're
and the chemicals to add sugar or flavoring and artificial color. So leave those out. Use your natural, like the lowest glycemic sugar is your citrus fruits, and to do fresh if you can.
Or like palm juice.
It's high in sugar, so to use a teeny tiny bit.
But it has a lot of resveratrol in it, so as a mixer. This, my daughter got me this because she knows I don't like anything that has like added junk to it. Yes, it just doesn't make me feel good. I don't even know the name of this stuff. Pitalot Naturals from Old Westminster. Anyway, this stuff doesn't have anything added to it at all, and it's actually a little bit fizzy. It's kind of a green wine. It's not aged very much at all. But they have this at Anchor, and I don't mean to be advertising for wine,
or alcohol, but you asked.
But yeah, you asked, and here's the thing. This brings up a whole other series of questions. The goal of eating paleo is not to eat like cavemen used to eat. That's not why we recommend it. The goal is to be healthy. They've done lots of study on wine that shows that particularly reds have some things in them that are very, very good for you.
Good for your heart.
Same thing with coffee. Paleolithic man didn't go around sipping cappuccinos. And I don't recommend that, but coffee has a lot of medicinal properties to it. The problem with coffee is the sugar that they add to it. Something that is generally very good is like a Mediterranean diet, which is very close to paleo, and has wine in it. Yeah.
But they cook a lot of seafoods that have great omega-3 properties in it, and lots of fresh vegetables.
And so, if you enjoy wine with your meal, go ahead and have that.
But don't overindulge, because that's your sugar intake as you're drinking it.
So yeah, the goal is to be healthy, not necessarily to deprive yourself of everything that you enjoy. If you're eating paleo 80%, you'll be in a situation where you will improve your health dramatically. And then if you do it 80% and then you cheat sometimes, usually make your cheats like
the healthier way.
Healthier cheats, don't go out and eat like birthday cake with this much icing on top, that sort of thing. And you'll get to the point where it's not worth it to eat that way anymore. You just don't feel good when you eat. It's
like cleaning your pipes. Once you start training your body to eat this way, you lose the cravings and the things that you used to eat that weren't good for you. They will literally make you sick. So I don't eat German chocolate cake that my sister used to make every year for birthdays. I make my own desserts so I can indulge in those.
And that brings up something else. If you're going to cheat, make your own cheats,
Like muffins and
but
cake.
Make them paleo. That'll do two things. It slows you down. You can't just open up a package and eat it. You have to make it. It slows you down that way, which is good as well. But if you're making it, you know what goes into it. It's fresh ingredients. It's good oils and good flours and that sort of thing. So that I got off on a big long tangent there about the wine, but
ask any other questions.
Yeah, don't think, oh, I've got to deprive myself and I'm not going to eat that way because I can't have those things that I really love. Well, if you like Coca-Cola, well, yeah, I'd say don't have that. It's not good for you, But you can have some of those things that you really.
You can replace it with kombucha.
Yeah, That's
a type of kombucha that's not high in sugar.
so anyway, there's substitutions for almost anything. You just don't want to go too far down that road. And like somebody I think has kind of gone too far is my daughter. She has stepkids at home who aren't used to eating this way, although she is, and her husband really enjoy eating this way because it's they see the health benefits of it. But she does a lot of paleo baking.
Like
So-
almost every day. Like she makes donuts or waffles or pancakes.
And they're not like donuts like you'd think. They're not.
No, they're
deep
paleo
fried,
donuts.
They're paleo donuts.
The recipes are.
But they're a pastry.
Right.
And I think they eat too much in the way of carbohydrates and not enough in the way of vegetables. And I've talked to her about that. And, you know, everybody makes their choices. But if you head down this road, it's going to benefit you. It really will. So I appreciate the question.
Any others?
Yvonne has a question.
Yes, I'd like to know when in the beginning, you showed the plate and how much should be meat and how much vegetables. So it looked like it was about maybe 30% meat or protein. And maybe I was wondering if it's like 60% vegetables because you want, what, 10% fats?
He does it differently than I do it.
Go ahead.
When I teach people what to put on their plate, I usually don't include this and I make it like a pie chart. So I'd say at least 25% meat, 25 to 30. Then let's say,
Just straws.
let me get this. Okay, can you all see that? Better?
A little bit better, yes.
Okay, so this is meat, and that includes chicken, fish, especially fish, beef, bison, venison,
Pork.
a little bit of pork.
Whatever.
Then, let's say, healthy fats, that's avocados and all your oils and your nuts. Then, this, basically 50% is at least vegetables, 50 to probably 60%, and then this is your fruit. Does that make sense? So these two are next to each other because meats will have their own fat, but let's say the avocado is very good for you. It's got its own fats and all your oils that you cook in. That's, well, it's not meat. Oils. And your nuts are in this too. Then your small amount is your fruits. And then the rest is vegetables. And let's say you need, everyone needs carbohydrates. So your carbohydrates will be the squash, the sweet potatoes, the carrots, your beets. Those are your starchy or vegetables, and that's your carbohydrates. They have the higher percentage of carbohydrates because your body needs that to burn and to have fuel to do the things that we need to do.
And if you look back at our bowl here, I mean, we've got olives, which that's fat. We've got avocado, which is fat. And then the vegetables are kind of almost hidden, you know, like here's the shrimp, but almost everything else, the tomatoes, the squash,
The sauce is
the
basically
sauce is
cauliflower.
vegetables. It's just almost all just hidden in there. But a huge amount of this is vegetables, and it's delicious. It really, really is. It is. It's great.
So does that answer your question on the percentages?
Yes, it does. Thank you, because that helps give me a guideline of how much of each category.
Right.
Thank you.
And you know, I try to make things easy and not get hung up on, oh, I gotta have this percentage. I just say, I tell my patients, eat all the vegetables you can.
And when you're hungry, eat a vegetable, and that helps too.
Yeah, or nuts are a good snack, but you can overdo nuts. You can. So, you know, you got to watch that. But I tell people basically fill your plate with vegetables and then eat all the meat you want to from there. Don't just eat meat, obviously. But yeah, grazing kind of all day long really helps fill up your body with vegetables.
But with the things that you can eat.
Yes,
Or that you should.
that are on the plate. Graze with things that are on the plate. Something that our granddaughter just loves to pop in her mouth on a regular basis are tomatoes. Little cherry tomatoes.
Eat like that whole half a thing on the way home from the grocery store just because I get hungry, and so that's easy to open and eat in my car. So I eat tomatoes too. So.
And you know, tomatoes have some sugar in them as well, and that's okay. But they've got a lot of nutritional value too. So this is a very good question. If you're staying on the plate and not getting down into this area, eat all that you want. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yes. Step one is to kind of move in this direction, and then you can kind of refine it and make sure that you get enough vegetables and make sure that you're not overdoing certain areas like fruit. I have told some patients who
they're pre-diabetic.
Yeah, they need to eat paleo, and well, they go off on the tangent that, well, fruit's paleo, so they load up on fruit, and that can be a real issue.
So different health issues, you can modify the paleo diet toward that. Let's say like, okay, diabetes and what is MS?
Oh, yes.
Autoimmune diseases have a lot to do with sugar too. So taking that sugar out and just have your low glycemic vegetable or fruits, which would be berries, but mostly the vegetables. And you can cook vegetables to make them taste great, mostly roasting. I love roasted vegetables. It just really seals good in the nutrition, and if you add spices to it, it's just
the flavor is really great. But yes. Well, I really appreciate everybody attending the class, and I wish we could do it live. Well, we're doing it live, but do it in person here. Yeah, everybody be having some food right now. Yeah, so that's what we usually do at our office. But anyway, I sure appreciate everybody attending.
And we hope that you come out from this seminar or this talk. What is paleo? How to do it, and the why part. Because your health is important. And we hope that you will take steps to have a healthier lifestyle.
Right. Thank you,
Great
Dr.
job,
Matt.
Dr. Masters.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right.
All right, well, we'll be closing down the session. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Do you want it warmed up?